Going to catch up with one of our favourite songwriters now. He's got a new single being released very shortly. We'll have a sneak peek of it. We just heard A Long Way to Fall. Lachlan Bryan, when you climb a mountain, there's always a long way to fall, isn't there?
There is indeed. It feels like a long time since we've put out new music. Of course, The Mountain was the last record we did. It's only 2 years ago, but 2 years is a long time in rock and roll or in country music as well.
There is a prolific amount of music being written from all angles as well.
There's constantly new music. I can't keep up with it, to be honest. I guess I'm a little bit slower than that in the way that I work. I guess the reason there's a new song every day is because there's lots of artists and lots of new artists. I tend to take my time, and I take my time listening to music as well. Like I really need to get to know a new song or get to know a new record or a new artist. So the world where new music comes out every day probably doesn't suit me that much because I'm still catching up on music that was released before I was born,
I was listening to the new song, which we're going to have a bit of a sneak preview of very shortly, Basics of Love, and I thought to myself, that song could have been a recording session from any decade that may have involved a great songwriter like a Chris Christopherson or a Townes Van Sant, Emmylou Harris joining in, maybe Waylon Jennings and Jesse Coulter. That's just got that feel about it where two people have just got together and collaborated. Yeah, well,
you've mentioned a bunch of my heroes there. I've been lucky enough to see Emmylou Harris play, obviously not the others so much, unfortunately, and obviously Waylon and Townes are gone, and they were gone long before I kind of got into this kind of music. So Emmylou Harris is the one element of that era that I've managed to see play a couple of times, and obviously I love her stuff. I'm heavily influenced, I guess, by that era, that 1970s era of country music. I think it was probably a golden age. I mean, I was born in the 80s, so I missed it completely. But it's there to rediscover, and YouTube is there for this purpose. I've watched hours and hours of those guys playing. I'm so grateful that there was video around, and I might not have got to go to those gigs, but I can still listen to those artists and still see what they looked like when they played. Hear the mistakes they made. All that stuff. YouTube has been a real blessing for me.
I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s and listening to music in the 70s and 80s and hearing it and thinking that I'm the first person ever to hear this music.
That's true. The first person that ever happened to me with was this American singer-songwriter Tom Waits. I got into him when I was at high school, and I had a teacher that put me onto him, and of course, I thought that I was discovering this new thing. He didn't sound like anything else I'd ever heard. And sure enough, I talked to it with my dad and my dad's friends and my mum's family, and everyone had his records back in the day, and it was kind of pop music back then. So you're right, but that doesn't really diminish how good it feels to suddenly discover something that's new to your ears. And, whenever I hear something that I haven't heard before that I love, I might as well be the only person that's heard it because I feel like they're singing just to me.
But it's been great to catch up with you, Lachlan Bryan and the Wilds. They've got some new music coming out, and we're going to have a bit of a sneak preview of Basics of Love.
Like gentle reminders of all of the things that they love. Basics of love.